I found the pregnancy test in the trash. After 40 years of waiting, I was finally going to be a father, or so I thought. But when I told my wife I knew, her reaction told me everything. So I smiled, played along, and spent 8 months planning the perfect revenge. My name is Lucas Grant. I'm 40 years old, and until recently, I was a project manager at a major construction corporation in Phoenix, Arizona. I spent 2 decades climbing the corporate ladder, managing million-dollar projects, coordinating teams of 50-plus people. I was good at my job, really good. I made solid money, around $170,000 a year, sometimes more with bonuses. I had a nice house in Scottsdale, drove a well-maintained F-150, and had a retirement account that was actually worth something. But none of that mattered compared to the one thing I didn't have, a family of my own. I'd dated over the years, sure. A few relationships here and there, but nothing that stuck. Work always came first. There was always another project, another deadline, another crisis that needed my attention. Before I knew it, I was 35, then 38, then pushing 40, and I was still coming home to an empty house. My parents didn't help. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, the same questions. When are you going to settle down, Lucas? My mother would ask, her voice heavy with concern. We're not getting any younger, you know. We'd love to meet our grandchildren before we're too old to enjoy them. Dad would just shake his head and say, Son, don't wait too long. Life moves faster than you think. They were 72 and 74, still sharp and active, but I could see the years catching up with them. The way Dad moved a little slower. The way Mom forgot small things more often. They wanted grandkids, and I wanted to give them that. More than that, I wanted it for myself. Then I met Amanda. It was at a charity fundraiser for a local children's hospital, one of those events my company sponsored every year. I usually showed up, made an appearance, wrote a check, and left. But that night, I saw her across the room, laughing with a group of people near the silent auction tables. She had this energy about her, this warmth that seemed to pull people in. Dark hair, bright smile, and a confident way of carrying herself. I'm not the kind of guy who approaches women at events like that, but something pushed me forward. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was just fate being cruel, bidding on anything interesting. I asked, nodding toward the auction sheet in her hand. She looked up, and when she smiled, I felt something shift inside me. Just a weekend getaway to Sedona, Amanda said. Figured I could use a break from the chaos. Chaos? I asked. Single mom, she replied, shrugging. 12-year-old daughter. Teaching middle school. You know how it is. I didn't, but I wanted to. We talked for an hour, then 2. By the end of the night, I had her number, and 3 days later, we went on our first date. That was 2 years ago. Amanda and I took things slow at first. Well, as slow as a 40-year-old man who'd been waiting his whole life for this could take it. We went on dates. Real dates. Dinners at nice restaurants, hiking trips up Camelback Mountain, weekend drives through the desert. She was easy to talk to, easy to be around. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just going through the motions. 3 months in, she introduced me to Olivia. I remember that day, clearly. We met at a pizza place near their apartment in Tempe. Olivia was 12, all long legs and cautious eyes, the kind of kid who'd learned early not to get too attached to people who might disappear. She barely said 2 words during that first lunch, just picked at her pepperoni pizza and answered my questions with shrugs. Give her time, Amanda said later, squeezing my hand as we walked to my truck. She's been through a lot with the divorce. I gave her time. I showed up. I didn't try to be her dad. She already had one of those, even if he wasn't around much. But I tried to be someone she could count on. I went to her soccer games, helped her with math homework when she got stuck, taught her how to change a tire when she turned 13. Slowly, she started to warm up. One Saturday afternoon, about a year into my relationship with Amanda, Olivia and I were working on a birdhouse in my garage. She was concentrating hard, trying to get the nails in straight, her tongue poking out the side of her mouth the way kids do when they're focused. Lucas, she said suddenly, not looking up from her work. Yeah. Thanks for sticking around. It was such a simple thing, but it hit me harder than I expected. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course, kiddo. I'm not going anywhere. She looked up then, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes that looked like trust. That was the moment I knew I wanted this life. Not just with Amanda, but with Olivia too. I wanted to be the guy who showed up, who stayed, who built something real. 6 months later, I proposed to Amanda. Nothing fancy, just the two of us on a hiking trail at sunset, the city lights of Phoenix spreading out below us. She said yes before I even finished asking. We got married in a small ceremony that fall. My parents were there, beaming like they'd won the lottery. Olivia stood next to Amanda, holding a bouquet of wildflowers, smiling wider than I'd ever seen. It was perfect. It was everything I'd ever wanted. For the first year, things were good. Better than good. Amanda moved into my house in Scottsdale with Olivia. We became a family. I'd come home from long days managing construction sites to find Amanda grading papers at the kitchen table and Olivia sprawled on the couch doing homework. It felt right. It felt like I'd finally found my place in the world. My parents adored Amanda. She's wonderful, Lucas, my mother said one Thanksgiving, pulling me aside in the kitchen. And Olivia is such a sweet girl. We're so happy for you. But there was always that unspoken question hanging in the air. When are we going to have a baby of our own? Amanda and I had talked about it before we got married. She said she wanted more kids, that she'd always imagined having at least 2. I told her I wanted that too, more than anything. But months passed, and nothing happened. It started small. Things I barely noticed at first because I didn't want to see them. Amanda would turn away from me in bed, curling up on her side, instead of pressing against me the way she used to. When I'd reach for her, she'd shift just enough that my hand would land on empty mattress instead. Not tonight, babe, she'd say softly. I've got a headache. Or, I'm just exhausted. These kids are wearing me out. Or, can we just cuddle? I'm not really in the mood. I understood. Teaching middle school was draining. I saw how tired she was when she came home, how she'd collapse on the couch with a glass of wine and zone out in front of the TV. So I didn't push. I figured we were just going through a rough patch, the kind every married couple faces. But weeks turned into months, and the excuses kept coming. One night, about 4 months into this new normal, I finally worked up the nerve to say something. We were lying in bed, the room dark except for the glow of her phone screen as she scrolled through something. Amanda, I said quietly. She didn't look up. Is everything okay? Between us, I mean. That got her attention. She set the phone down on her nightstand and turned to face me. What do you mean? I chose my words carefully. It's just, we haven't been close lately. And I miss you. She sighed, and I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Annoyance? I couldn't tell. I'm sorry, Lucas. I've just been dealing with some health stuff. Health stuff. My stomach tightened. What kind of health stuff? Amanda shifted uncomfortably. It's kind of personal. Female stuff, you know. I've got some inflammation. Down there. It's painful, and I just need time for it to heal. I sat up slightly, concern overriding everything else. Have you seen a doctor? I have an appointment scheduled, she said quickly. It's nothing serious, just uncomfortable. I should be fine in a few months. A few months. The words hung in the air between us. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Because I knew you'd worry, Amanda replied, reaching over to touch my arm. And it's embarrassing, okay? It's not something I want to talk about in detail. I wanted to press further, but the way she was looking at me, like I was making this harder than it needed to be, made me back off. All right, I just want you to be okay. I will be, she said, giving me a small smile. Just give me some time. So I did. I gave her time. I stopped initiating. I focused on work, on Olivia, on keeping the household running smoothly. But in the back of my mind, something didn't sit right. The inflammation excuse made sense on the surface, but there were other things. The way Amanda guarded her phone now, always keeping it face down. The way she'd suddenly started working late at school, staying for meetings that never seemed to end. The way she'd come home smelling like she'd just showered, her hair damp, claiming she'd hit the gym. I told myself I was being paranoid. Amanda loved me. We were building a life together. She wouldn't do anything to jeopardize that. But doubt is a persistent thing. Once it takes root, it's hard to kill. It was a Tuesday night. Nothing special. Amanda had gone to bed early, claiming she was exhausted from a long day of parent-teacher conferences. Olivia was in her room doing homework, headphones on, lost in her own world. I stayed up watching a basketball game, nursing a beer, trying not to think about the growing distance between Amanda and me. Around 11, I remembered I hadn't taken out the trash. It was one of those small things that needed doing, and if I didn't do it now, I'd forget in the morning. I grabbed the bag from the kitchen, tied it off, and walked it out to the bin in the garage. The night was cool, quiet. I lifted the lid to the trash can and tossed the bag in. As I did, something caught my eye. A piece of plastic wedged between some crumpled tissues and an empty shampoo bottle. It looked like it had been deliberately shoved down, hidden. I don't know why I reached for it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was that nagging feeling I've been carrying around for months. But I pulled it out, and the second I saw what it was, my heart stopped. A pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. Positive. I stood there in the dim light of the garage, staring at that little stick like it held the secrets of the universe. Amanda was pregnant. My wife, my beautiful, distant wife, was carrying a baby. For a split second, pure joy flooded through me. This was it. This was what I'd been waiting for my entire life. After 40 years of putting it off, of focusing on work, of wondering if I'd ever have a family of my own, it was finally happening. I was going to be a father. But then the joy turned to confusion. Why hadn't she told me? Why had she thrown the test away, burying it under trash like she was trying to hide it? Maybe she wanted to surprise me. Maybe she was waiting for the right moment, planning something special. That had to be it. I decided right then that I wasn't going to wait. I was going to show her how happy I was, how ready I was for this. The next evening, I left work early and stopped by the grocery store. I grabbed everything I needed. Her favorite flowers, ingredients for steak and mashed potatoes, candles, sparkling cider. By the time Amanda got home from school, the house smelled like a 5-star restaurant. She walked through the door, looking tired as usual, but when she saw the dining room, the table set with candles flickering, soft music playing, her eyebrows shot up. "Lucas, what's all this?" I smiled, walking over to kiss her cheek. "Just wanted to do something special for you." Amanda looked around, suspicious, but trying to hide it. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble." "I wanted to," I said, pulling out a chair for her. "Come on, sit." She hesitated, then sat down. I poured her a glass of sparkling cider and took the seat across from her. We ate, making small talk about her day, about a project I was managing at work. I was waiting for the right moment, waiting until we'd finished eating. When her plate was empty, I reached across the table and took her hand. "Amanda," I said softly. "I know." Her face went blank. "Know what?" I squeezed her hand gently, smiling. "About the baby. I found the test." For a long moment, she didn't react. She just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she pulled her hand back. "You went through the trash?" Her voice was flat. "I wasn't going through the trash," I said quickly. "I was taking it out, and I saw the test." "Amanda, why didn't you tell me?" She looked away, her jaw tight. "I was going to. When? I don't know," she said quietly. "I wanted to surprise you." But there was no excitement in her voice. No joy. Just nothing. I leaned forward, trying to catch her eye. "Amanda, this is amazing. This is what we've been waiting for." She finally looked at me, and for just a second, I saw something in her eyes. Something that looked like fear. But then she forced a smile, small and strained. "Yeah," she said. "It is." That night, after the awkward dinner, I lay in bed next to Amanda, staring at the ceiling while she slept or pretended to sleep. Something was wrong. I'd spent 20 years managing construction projects, reading people, spotting problems before they became disasters. And every instinct I had was screaming at me that this pregnancy wasn't the blessing I'd thought it was. The next morning, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Amanda was on her phone constantly. At breakfast, while Olivia ate cereal and scrolled through her own device, Amanda would be typing away, a small smile on her face. When I'd walk into the room, she'd tilt the screen away or set it down quickly. "Work stuff," she'd say if I asked. But I've been married to her long enough to know what work stress looked like, and this wasn't it. One evening, about a week after I'd found the test, Amanda announced she had to stay late at school for a curriculum meeting. She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and headed out the door. Something about the way she said it, too casual, too rehearsed, made me suspicious. After she left, I sat in my truck in the driveway for a few minutes, thinking. Then I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I drove to her school. The parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived. A few cars scattered here and there, but nothing that suggested a meeting was happening. I parked at the far end, out of sight, and waited. 20 minutes later, Amanda walked out of the building. But she wasn't alone. She was with a man I didn't recognize. Younger, maybe late 20s, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt. They were laughing about something, standing close. Too close. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Amanda touched his arm, said something that made him laugh, and then walked to her car. He watched her go, grinning like an idiot, before heading to his own vehicle. I didn't follow her home. I couldn't. I sat there in that parking lot, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Maybe he was a co-worker. Maybe he was innocent. But the way she'd touched him, the way she'd smiled, I knew. Over the next few days, I kept watching. Amanda started working late more often. She'd come home an hour or two after she said she would, always with an excuse. Budget meetings, parent conferences, training sessions. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed proof. Real proof. So I did something I'm not proud of. I bought a small GPS tracker, one of those discreet devices you can attach under a car. One night, while Amanda was inside taking a shower, I went out to the garage and stuck it under her sedan. The next afternoon, I watched the tracker on my phone as Amanda's car moved across Phoenix. She wasn't going to school. She was heading in the opposite direction, toward a neighborhood I didn't recognize. I followed the signal to a coffee shop on the east side of town. Through the window, I could see her sitting at a corner table with the same man from the parking lot. They were leaning in close, talking, laughing. I pulled out my phone and took a picture. Then I sat there, watching them for another 20 minutes before I finally drove away. That night, I called a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Richard Brennan, a guy I'd worked with a few years back on a commercial project. He was sharp, no nonsense, and didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Lucas," he said when I walked into his office, "what can I do for you?" I sat down and laid it all out. The pregnancy, the distance, the late nights, the man at the coffee shop. When I finished, Richard leaned back in his chair and studied me. "You think the baby isn't yours," he said. I nodded. "I don't know for sure, but my gut's telling me something's off." "Then you need proof," Richard said. "Before you do anything, before you confront her, before you make any moves, you need to know for certain." "How?" I asked. "Don't I have to wait until the baby's born?" He shook his head. "There's a prenatal paternity test. It's done through a blood sample, completely safe for the mother and the baby. If you can get a sample from her next doctor's appointment, we can run it against your DNA." I felt a weight lift off my chest. "And if it's not mine, then we move forward with everything," Richard said. "Divorce. Asset protection. You'll want to get out ahead of this before she tries to come after you financially." I nodded slowly, processing it all. "What do I need to do?" "Give me that blood sample," he said. "I'll handle the rest." 2 weeks later, Amanda had a prenatal appointment scheduled. I told her I wanted to go with her, play the supportive husband. She looked surprised but didn't object. We sat in the waiting room together, Amanda flipping through a magazine while I pretended to check emails on my phone. When a nurse called her name, I followed her into the exam room. The appointment was routine. They checked her blood pressure, asked her a few questions, and then told her they needed to draw blood for some standard tests. I watched as the nurse prepped the needle, inserted it into Amanda's arm, and filled several vials. When Amanda stepped out to use the restroom, I made my move. I'd already done my research. I knew how much it would cost to get what I needed. I slipped $200 bills into the nurse's hand and leaned in close. "I need a small sample of that blood," I said quietly. "I want to surprise my wife with something special." The nurse hesitated, glancing toward the door. Then she looked at the cash in her hand and nodded. Without a word, she filled an unlabeled vial and set it on the counter, turning away to log something into the computer. I grabbed it and slipped it into my jacket pocket. That afternoon, I went to a clinic and had my own blood drawn. I sent both samples to a private lab Richard had recommended. Then I waited. A week passed. Then another. Amanda went about her life, seemingly oblivious, talking about baby names and nursery colors. I played along, nodding, smiling, pretending everything was fine. Then the envelope arrived. I opened it in my truck parked outside a job site, my hands shaking. I scanned the document, my eyes landing on the one line that mattered. Probability of paternity, 0%. I wasn't the father. I sat there for a long time, staring at those words. Part of me had hoped I was wrong. Part of me had wanted to believe that this was all some misunderstanding. But now I knew the truth. Amanda had cheated on me. She'd lied to me. And now she expected me to raise another man's child. I folded the paper, put it back in the envelope, and made a decision. She wasn't going to get away with this. The day after I got the paternity results, I sat down with Richard in his office. I handed him the envelope without a word. He read through it, his expression unchanging, then set it down on his desk. "All right," Richard said. "Now we move forward. But Lucas, you need to be smart about this. No confrontations. No emotional decisions. You do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you, and you'll come out of this clean." "What's the plan?" I asked. "First, we protect your assets," he said. "You've got a good income, a house, retirement accounts. If Amanda tries to go after you in the divorce, we need to make sure she gets nothing. Second, we need to time this perfectly. You don't want to tip your hand too early." "When do I tell her?" I asked. "You don't," Richard said. "Not until everything's in place. We wait until she's in the hospital, having that baby. Then we serve her the papers. By the time she realizes what's happening, you'll be gone." It was cold, calculated, exactly what I needed. Over the next few months, I started dismantling my life with Amanda piece by piece. I opened a new bank account that she didn't know about and started funneling money into it. Not all at once. That would have raised red flags, but gradually, a few thousand here and there. I also started moving things out of the house. Small stuff at first. Some old tools I told Amanda I was lending to a buddy. A few boxes of personal items I said I was donating. I rented a storage unit 3 towns over and filled it slowly, carefully, making sure she never noticed. At the same time, I reached out to an old friend, Brandon Hughes. Brandon and I had worked together years ago before he moved to Albuquerque to start his own construction consulting firm. We'd stayed in touch over the years, and when I called him to ask if he had any openings, he didn't hesitate. "Always got room for you, Lucas," Brandon said. "When are you thinking?" "Few months," I said. "I'll explain everything when I get there." "Sounds serious." "It is," I said, "but I'll handle it." While all this was happening, I kept playing the role of the excited husband. I rubbed Amanda's feet when she complained about swelling. I listened to her talk about baby names. I assembled the crib we'd bought, painted the nursery, did everything a good husband was supposed to do. But inside, I felt nothing. One evening, Amanda's ex-husband Kevin called. I was in the garage working on something when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Lucas." The voice was cautious. "Yeah, who's this?" "It's Kevin. Kevin Roberts. Amanda's ex." I paused, surprised. Kevin and I had never spoken directly. I'd met him once or twice when he picked up Olivia, but we'd never had a real conversation. "What can I do for you?" I asked carefully. Kevin hesitated. "Look, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but Amanda did the same thing to me. The cheating, the lying. I tried to warn Olivia not to get too attached to you, because I figured Amanda would pull the same stunt again." My jaw tightened. "You knew." "I suspected," Kevin said. "Amanda's good at hiding things. But patterns don't lie. I just thought you should know. You're not crazy for whatever you're thinking right now." I didn't confirm or deny anything. "Thanks for the heads up." "Yeah," Kevin said. "Good luck, man. You're gonna need it." After I hung up, I stood there in the garage for a long time, processing what he'd said. Amanda had done this before. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was who she was. And I was done being her fool. By the time Amanda hit 7 months, I had everything in place. The new apartment in Albuquerque was rented and furnished. The storage unit was full. My bank accounts were separated. The house was quietly listed for sale with a realtor who understood the need for discretion. I'd also started documenting everything. I kept a journal, dates, times, places where Amanda said she was versus where her GPS tracker showed she actually was. I saved the photos I'd taken of her with Justin. I printed out the paternity test results and stored them in a safe deposit box at a bank Amanda didn't know about. Richard had been clear. I needed an airtight case. No room for her to claim anything. No way for her to twist the narrative. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the garage organizing some tools when Olivia wandered in. She was 13 now, taller, more mature, but still that same kid I taught to build a birdhouse. "Hey, Lucas," she said, leaning against the workbench. "Hey, kiddo. What's up?" She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Are you and Mom okay?" The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask?" Olivia shrugged. "I don't know. You guys just seem different, like you're not really talking to each other anymore." I set down the wrench I was holding and looked at her. She was perceptive, smarter than I'd given her credit for. Sometimes adults go through rough patches, I said carefully. But it's nothing for you to worry about. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe me. Okay. I don't want things to change. I like having you around. That hit harder than I expected. I'd grown to love this kid. She wasn't mine by blood, but I'd been there for her in ways her real father never had. And now I was about to walk out her life. Olivia, I said, my voice steady. No matter what happens, you're a good kid. Don't forget that. She looked at me, confused, but before she could ask what I meant, Amanda called from inside the house. Olivia, dinner. She gave me one last uncertain look, then headed inside. I stood there alone in the garage, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. A few weeks later, Amanda was 8 months pregnant. She was moving slower now, complaining about back pain and exhaustion. I made sure to be attentive, to keep up appearances. One evening, I was sitting on the couch when my phone buzzed. It was a text from the realtor. Offer accepted. Closing in 3 weeks. Buyers want to move in ASAP. I stared at the message, then typed back. Perfect. Let's move forward. Amanda walked into the room, lowering herself onto the couch next to me with a groan. This baby's killing my back. I set my phone down, face down. You want me to rub it? Would you? She asked, turning slightly. I placed my hands on her lower back and started massaging. She sighed in relief, leaning into the pressure. You're so good to me, Lucas, she murmured. I didn't respond. I just kept rubbing her back, my face blank, my mind already in Albuquerque. 3 weeks later, the house sold. The young couple who bought it got the keys the same week Amanda's due date arrived. I timed it perfectly. Everything was ready. The divorce papers were drawn up. The paternity test was filed with the court. My new phone number was activated. My truck was packed with the last of my things. All I had to do now was wait for Amanda to go into labor. And then I'd be gone. Amanda's contractions started at 5 in the morning. I'd been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, knowing this was the day. When she shook my shoulder, her voice tight with pain, I sat up immediately. Lucas, she said, it's time. I nodded, getting out of bed with practiced calm. Let me grab the bags. I packed them weeks ago. Her hospital bag with clothes and toiletries, supposedly mine with a change of clothes. Except mine was mostly empty. I wouldn't need it. The drive to the hospital was quiet except for Amanda's breathing through contractions. I kept my hand steady on the wheel, my face calm. At the entrance, I helped her into a wheelchair, a nurse appearing almost immediately. I'll park the truck and be right there, I told Amanda, squeezing her hand. She nodded, her face pale. Hurry. I watched the nurse wheel her through the automatic doors. Then I got back in my truck and drove away. My first stop was Richard's office. He was waiting with the final documents, divorce papers, paternity test results, proof of Amanda's affair. Everything was organized in a legal envelope with Amanda's name on it. The courier will deliver these to the hospital in 2 hours, Richard said. By then, you'll be in New Mexico. I signed the last papers for the house sale, shook his hand, and left. By noon, I was crossing the state line into New Mexico. I'd already changed my phone number that morning. When Amanda tried to call, she'd get nothing but a disconnected message. I imagined her in that hospital room, asking the nurses where I was, checking her phone over and over, the confusion slowly turning to panic. And then the courier would arrive with the envelope. She'd open it and see everything. The divorce petition, the paternity test showing 0% probability I was the father, photos of her with Justin, bank statements showing I'd emptied our accounts. By the time she was discharged, she'd go home to find the house sold. New owners, new locks, everything gone. She'd check the bank accounts. Frozen. The credit cards. Canceled. And when she'd finally called Justin in desperation, hoping he'd step up, I knew what would happen. Guys like him never do. He'd make excuses, maybe even demand his own paternity test. She'd be alone with a baby that nobody wanted to claim. When the baby was born, the husband was gone. His phone, disconnected. Her accounts, frozen. Her house, sold. I pulled into a gas station outside Albuquerque and bought a coffee. My new phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. Apartment's ready. See you tomorrow. I typed back, on my way. As I got back on the highway, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Freedom. Amanda had gambled everything on me being too trusting, too desperate for a family to ask questions. She'd been wrong. 14 months later, I was sitting in my new office in Albuquerque, reviewing blueprints for a commercial project downtown. The job with Brandon had been exactly what I needed. Challenging work, good money, and distance from everything that had happened in Phoenix. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Lucas, honey, how are you?" "I'm good, Mom. Really good. Your father and I were just talking about you," she said. "We're so proud of how you handled everything. That must have been so hard." I told my parents the truth after I left. The affair, the fake pregnancy, all of it. They'd been devastated for me, but supportive. My mother had cried. My father had said, "You did the right thing, son. Don't ever doubt that." "I'm doing fine," I said. "Better than fine, actually." "Have you heard anything from Amanda?" Mom asked carefully. "No, and I don't want to." Richard had told me what happened after I left. Amanda had tried to get alimony, tried to claim I owed her something. But the paternity test and evidence of her affair destroyed any case she had. Justin had indeed refused to take responsibility, demanding his own DNA test. When it came back showing he was the father, he still wanted nothing to do with the baby. Last I heard, Amanda had moved in with her parents, struggling to make ends meet on a teacher's salary with a newborn. I felt nothing about it. Not satisfaction, not guilt, just nothing. "Listen, Mom, I have to go, but I'll call you this weekend." "Okay, sweetheart. We love you." "Love you too." I hung up and turned back to my work. That evening, I had dinner with a woman named Sarah, a project coordinator at a competing firm. We'd met at a construction conference 2 months ago and had been seeing each other casually since. She was smart, funny, and most importantly, honest. We were taking things slow, and that was exactly what I needed. As I locked up my office and headed to my truck, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the planning, the execution. Some people might say I went too far, that I should have confronted Amanda, given her a chance to explain. But I'd learned something important. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Amanda had shown me she was a liar, a cheater, someone who'd use me for financial security while getting her thrills elsewhere. I'd simply made sure she understood there were consequences. I climbed into my truck, started the engine, and drove toward my new life. The past was behind me, and I was finally free.